Richard Davis, and I'm with Dr. Holly Hollis, and this is The Hills Are Not Flat, where we map the terrain of recovery. And today's episode, we're going to talk about aviation and the HIMSS program and high stakes of licenses. Obviously, doctors and nurses can lose their license, and Dr. Hollis knows this, but this is unique to pilots. And the HIMSS program is a program that helps pilots that have um, alcohol or substance abuse problems to get into a program where they can be monitored and then get back to flying. Uh, you know, it kind of happens a lot of different ways. Sometimes it happens with a raise of a hand. You say, "Hey, I got a problem," and I just don't feel safe anymore, and um, and it's just time to make a change. And then other times it's kind of it's uh it's kind of pushed on you, right? Yeah, you go to the checkpoint and you thought that you were 8 hours bottle the throttle and you blew a little bit too high. This happens a lot in Amsterdam. They're probably one of the biggest hubs for these sort of tests. But anyways, what happens either way, whether you concede defeat and you say I've got a problem, or if someone tells you have a problem, or if you find yourself getting flagged in aviation, it always ends up with a red flag and having to get a psychiatric test and to actually figure out whether or not you have a problem or not. Um, as with pilots, surgeons, controllers, even air traffic controllers, nuclear operators, there's zero margin of error, right? I mean, you just can't be wrong. You got, 300, 400 people, depending on you. As an air traffic controller, it's even more. And I've seen air traffic controllers in the same seat as pilots, and they actually they manage more lives than even the pilots that are flying. When you're controlling, aircraft that are moving toward each other.
Yeah.
But it is a very crucial safety factor. I've seen the programs for doctors, I've seen the programs for nurses, but there's really, really nothing that's quite as robust as the HIMSS program for aviation and this. So, anyways, you guys get their license from all different walks of life, whether it's the military or they went to school and they got their ATP just the traditional way. But as a pilot, your license is your identity. I mean, that is your bread and butter. That's who you are. But you know, the other part of it is you can't have a medical and you can't be signed off on a medical unless you're medically able to operate a plane.
Right.
And obviously, alcoholism or drug addiction, or even alcohol abuse, it prohibits you from being able to exercise that right or be able to get your class one for flying. So what happens a lot of times is that guys end up, going to get either cleared or not cleared, and a whole lot of times they're not cleared. And I can speak from this from first experience at Talbot in Atlanta that it usually ends up with you being inside of the HIMSS program. And the HIMSS program is pretty robust. It is a 8-year program.
What is it? Real quick, the HIM stands for, just for, in case someone doesn't know, the Human Intervention Motivation Study, correct?
Yes, yeah. And so, what it is, it's to give pilots another chance to, get everything right, get their ducks in a row, get the help they need, and then to show that they're safe through different protocols. The first it's regimented the first 1 to 2 years. It's, random alcohol and drug tests. It kind of wands off a little bit at time, as 3 and 4 or a little bit less. Years 5 through 6, are PEth tests and with random drug tests as well. Uh, but but the first 4 years are pretty regimented. It is um, you have to go to AA meetings, one AA meeting for your inside of your actually your milieu there, or like birds of a feather is one of them. And then, one class a week for, um, aftercare. And then you have to meet with your AME, which is your medical examiner, uh, once a quarter. And then that goes on in varying degrees, until 8 years before you're off. And then after that, you see your AME once a year, and you have a special flight issuance, for your medical. So you never really get your medical back like a standard person. If you're in the HIMSS program, you're always just being, monitored and for obvious reasons. I mean, it's that program, but it is pretty regimented.
Does it have really good evidence of effectiveness? So it's pretty effective.
Well, it's kind of funny. It's the it has one of the highest efficacy models of any program out. It's 96%
What?
effective. So 96% of commercial pilots that enter the HIMSS program, never relapse again.
So is it when in terms of like a model, is it more of a rehabilitation like oriented model or more and less punitive
Well,
or how?
it's more of one of those do this then that, right? So do this or you don't get to fly.
Okay.
And most pilots already that I've experienced, and I feel maybe I'm the same way. And being in the Air Force, most guys in the Air Force, you kind of have this you have this passion, for your license, and you're willing to do just about anything to keep it. And you so I don't know what the difference is between that and maybe doctors. I've had a few physician friends, just like Roach, who lost their licenses 5 times before, they just ultimately just did never get it again. I've seen nurses lose their license over and over again, but
Yeah.
this program is robust enough, and the camaraderie is enough that it does have that efficacy rate. So, but anyways, it is hard, and so I went to Talbot's, and I was there with a lot of different pilots, and you get guys from the Navy, Air Force, all the way down to guys that just went to you know school for flying and just got their just paid for it all right. And but what you'll find though is most of the guys, I mean, they're great guys, but they're very proud of being a pilot, and they're willing to do just about anything to keep it. So it's kind of a different breed of guys. But anyway, so there's random testing, there's mandatory reporting, there's there's open dialogue with your AME, and you're talking to each other constantly. If you're a Delta pilot or another pilot, they deal with a lot of Delta pilots, but you have a pilot that's kind of your mentor, or that kind of looks over you and kind of checks your safety protocol, or to make sure that you're staying diligent with your recovery.
Mhm.
They meet, uh, you know, and it just depends on where you're at in the world, right? But specifically in Atlanta, they meet there at Talbot at the the Birds of a Feather meeting,
Mhm.
and they have lots of different events and stuff to kind of keep everyone together for Christmas and holidays and stuff. So it is a family. I mean, and they make it a family. So it's there's a lot of old birds there, and they're always there to help mentor the guys that are coming in. But
Do you ever
but
see anybody push back against it? Like
of
they'd rather
course, yeah,
hide than not?
when everybody comes in, everyone wants to believe that they don't have a problem, right? I mean,
Right.
you know, if you didn't get caught and maybe somebody said something and you never had an instance, I mean, obviously everyone comes in and says, I'm just here for the uh the consultation, I'm here to see what it is, right? And I guess 80% of the people end up, getting called in to finish the program.
Yeah.
So it is. I mean, it's a big thing. But the thing is though, in aviation, and especially in the military, there is this culture of drinking, and it doesn't really seem like a big deal. Whenever and I have other buddies of mine that are pilots too, and they never drink, before they're going to fly, but the culture is drinking. I mean, there's a lot of drinking in the culture,
Hmm.
and and it's really tempting, I guess, whenever you're on a layover to maybe imbibe a little bit too much, especially if you
In a
know,
foreign country, especially where it's more
well, if you get
socially
away, but even if you
acceptable.
just get away for a little bit, some of these guys, they it's kind of like a vacation. You get away from your wife for a little bit. It's like going on a little trip. So,
Yeah.
it starts off kind of very small and then it graduates. And then before you know it, you're calling in the next day saying, "Hey, man, I'm too drunk. I can't fly." So, and that happens a lot. And then you have to pick the phone call up and it's not a bad thing. The, the, uh, the commercial airlines make it very easy for pilots to do the right thing. They really do, and they really support them a lot. And they get paid while they're going through the program and until they get their license back. They get full support. So it's not like you would think. It's not like, oh, we're writing you off and you lost your job.
So it's not like being, antiquated with the Scarlet Letter. Like
No,
it,
not really. No, no. As a pilot, actually, if you work for a commercial airline, I mean, you have job security. Until you're finished and you're better, right? And then you got your job waiting on you. Once they clear you and you get your medical back,
Mhm.
and you can do your proficiency training, and prove that you're ready to go. You're right back in action again. Sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's 8 months, sometimes it's a year. It depends, but yeah, the airlines have done really well about supporting, alcoholism, or as it pertains to their pilots being safe. So, they'd rather someone raise their hand than be called out, and they don't give a lot of flack for someone raising their hand. So, it is the scarlet letter. No guy really wants to put his hand up. Everyone wants to keep the charade going on as long as they can. No one really wants to say, "Hey, I got a problem." But the airlines really make it easy for guys to do that and to do the right thing. And obviously, that sort of reporting and that sort of tolerance saves a lot of lives probably. So
Right.
um, but but the thing is though, I think the hardest thing about raising your hand, it's not that you saved your job, it's that you've got to do this 8-year program now, and that kind of that sort of kind of hits you kind of hard while you're in the program, thinking, "Oh my God, I got 8 years of this."
It
Uh,
does seem like a long time, but I understand why. It just seems it seems
but I'm
like it's
saying,
daunting.
but what are the programs for doctors and for nurses? I mean, it's not 8 years, is it?
No. Usually a couple, it depends on the severity, and there are different ones for alcohol abuse versus like narcotics or opioid. It's different ones and it varies. Is it first offense, multiple offenses? So no, and they're not out to take away someone's license if they don't have to, if there's not, going to be a long-term problem with it. I mean, there's definitely things that help you get back into the setting and in practice. But so it sounds very
Well,
similar.
Well, I know, having friends that are doctors and stuff, there's a little bit of a scarlet letter that goes with that. But it seems that in the pilot community, guys just kind of let bygones be bygones. You say I'm in the HIMSS program, cool. All right. Yeah. And I guess we're not having a drink today. So everyone's pretty kosher with that and they understand what that means. So
Well,
it's
that's good. I mean, it sounds like there's some support or there's some knowing in it that there's not going to be a judgment really if you say I'm in the HIMSS program, they're understanding.
yeah, but the thing is, it does take a lot of paperwork. It does take a lot of you have to see a lot of shrinks. You have to jump through a
Wherewithal,
lot of
eight
hoops.
years.
And you got well, no, but I mean, even in the beginning, you have to pass a lot of tests. You have to, you're obviously familiar with the DSM-5, but you have to take a lot of these tests to kind of score where you're at on your where you're sitting, where you score psychiatrically, and anyways, there's a battery of tests, and they want to see where you're at now. They want to see where you're at, 6 months later. Has your cognitive thinking increased? Stayed the same? Are you trending toward health, being healthy again? So there's definitely a lot of hoops to jump through.
And sort of
They
like an accountability thing, it sounds like too, is big. Would you say that?
Oh yeah, I mean that's 90% of it. It's accountability.
Do you
You
feel
know.
like being part of the program, just general here, that it would make could make anyone feel less than or take them back professionally a notch to where they feel bad about it? Or is it not really I know it's not intended for that, but everybody's very different when it comes.
No, I think what happens, by the time you get there, um, you know, because the HIMSS program has such a high success rate, uh, most guys just use it to their benefit because of that, and it's an asset to them and their families and their immediate milieu. Obviously their their uh, their company, but their families and their friends, and knowing that there's that efficacy rate, for success, and
Mhm.
knowing that you're being monitored. It's kind of like we said maybe in the first episode. Sometimes these programs help you uh, to prove yourself, right? Not just to your job and not just to keep your job, but to uh, to the people that you love and that you want to know that you're doing better. So
Yeah.
no, I don't. I think it's one of the most robust systems I've seen as it pertains to professional degrees or professional paths, and obviously there's not any other path like it that has the same efficacy rate for success.
That's good though. So it's very like nationally known.
Yeah, it is. And so they started back in the 70s. It's kind of progressed, with the differing times. The 8 years is kind of a new thing, but
That's long.
well, yeah, it's a long time. But if you can make it through that, I guess you can make it through anything, right?
Absolutely. And I think maybe the accountability does come into play there. So it helps you not fall back into it.
But it's not just pilots. Talbot is one of the leading recovery centers, for pilots in Atlanta. But they also see physicians, surgeons and nurses and doctors and lawyers and stuff. And of course they see other flight individuals like flight controllers and stuff. So flight controllers also have a very high stress job,
Mhm.
and there's a high alcoholism rate inside of those ranks as well. And so, anyways, they have a similar protocol, similar sort of set of protocol for their recovery program too.
So I just have a question, a generic question. Why do you think the alcoholism rates or maybe even higher, like in this industry, or are you
Well,
seeing a lot more?
but I wouldn't say just that. I mean, if you look at the statistics, it's not it's with doctors too.
Yeah,
You know, one of the funniest things that I saw while I was there was you know, doctors who were doing liver transplants there for alcoholism. You know, you're like you're digging into these livers every day, you know, and they're like big, you know, pieces of cement, and you're guzzling away, you know, a handle of vodka a day.
yeah,
So you know, it's not just pilots. I mean, it's uh, it's it's doctors in the profession. You know this.
I
Nurses
know.
have a high um, turnover for drug addiction, right? And a lot of times they're using the stuff that they have in the OR, right?
Well, I
Mhm.
mean, sure, like if you're in that situation, absolutely. But I just meant like, does something trigger it? Like, I guess in nursing or as in a doctor, like high stress type situations, if you can't maybe handle the load, the course load, and you're just trying to self-medicate or cope or
No,
preemptively, like, is there a reason
you
that you see
know,
it a lot?
I think we kind of boiled it down to it's like situational narcissism, right? So, I mean, like everyone wants to say, oh, narcissism, but it's like situational narcissism. It's like a pilot is able to, it's like a surgeon, they're able to disconnect themselves from the situation enough to be able to handle the stress, right?
Like
So
compartmentalize it.
they're able to compartmentalize. It's like a person who knows exactly, like in their mind, they're like, I can do this, I can do it, right? I mean, like anything, right? And a
Yeah.
surgeon has to have the same sort of, you want guys in those roles to be narcissistic situationally, right? In those areas, right? But you know, with that there's a certain grandiosity that goes with it, and I don't, but there's also a sense of insecurity. So when I say that there's a situational narcissism, you know, it's a funny thing how alcoholism and narcissism can play together, especially in situational narcissism as I pertain to being a doctor or a pilot. It's the guy who says, I got it, right? I've got this, I can do it. Man, I can land this anywhere, right? No matter what the crosswind is, I am going to put it on the numbers and I'm gonna just slide in. That guy is who you want to fly your plane
Yeah.
because that guy is not going to buckle under duress, right? But underneath some of that, there are some insecurities too. So that's why I call it kind of situational narcissism. There are some insecurities, and then that's what drives some of the drinking. But you know, I don't think it necessarily starts that way. But what happens is that you did something good, right? Or you finished the surgery, you landed the plane, you got everybody there, everyone's happy. You know, you're traveling with the crew. You're the man. You're the captain, or you're the man, right? And so and you start drinking just a little bit, on layovers and stuff like that. But um, I just think that with that personality type, it's kind of hard to explain. There are a lot of times there's this underlying insecurity there. There's this I'm not perfect enough. So with narcissism, there's always that underlying factor of I could have done better. I can be better. I should be better. I'm not good enough. I want to be better. And you're measuring yourself against every other man. You're measuring yourself against this pilot, that pilot, and and it does kind of play its toll on the psyche, even though the guy acts like he's got it all together and he's just like, he's just going to run this thing into the ground no matter what. There's still that feeling of not being enough. And it's just a really hard thing to explain. And a lot of pilots will tell you that. If they really get honest with themselves, they'll tell you that somewhere deep inside, they just didn't feel like they made the cake, they didn't make it somewhere. And so there's that little thing in there that kind of drives you to to maybe be a little bit more apt to for these behaviors, I think. But it's a funny thing because everyone thinks that pilots are just, you know, just full of it all the time, right? Just like
I
they.
don't. I love pilots. I think
Well,
they're
I'm just
great.
saying, but I mean, like, but if you really talk to about 9 out of 10, if they really were honest with you, they would tell you that they wish they were a little bit better. They could do just a little bit better. They could have just hit it a little bit better. They could have just done just a little bit better.
Do you
And
think that's ingrained or innate or it's learned? Because isn't that all of us? Like, I'll finish with a patient today, or not today, on a day, and I'm like, I should have done this better. I could have taught that better, educated a little bit better, or maybe I should have picked this medicine instead of that. Is that so? Do you not think that's sort of like ingrained in all of us that we could all be better?
I don't
Or,
think it's ingrained in everyone, but I think it's ingrained in these professions. I think a lot
yeah,
of doctors think the same way. But
yeah.
listen, man, I've seen plastic surgeons that just really think that they're gods. And they don't think that way. I think for what I've seen, it's more relatable to the guys I've seen in the military and that are pilots. I've seen a lot of God complexes in plastic surgeons, and I haven't seen a whole lot of that insecurity really. There, maybe they don't show it, or maybe you just never hear about it. Uh, but it is kind of unique to pilots, and we talk about it, in the program. Um, but it's funny. Some of these guys have done some of the have done miraculous things in the war. They've flown, hundreds of thousands of hours, and just really been the creme de creme of the Navy and the Air Force and fighter pilot. I mean, like just even some of the test pilots, right? Just the best of them all still have that little thing inside. That little I'm not enough. And I'm talking guys, man, that like that have that have done things for the for our country and and for and for testing and stuff that most countries are other guys aren't really even capable of, and they still have that little thing inside. So I
Yeah, it goes
I,
back
I
to
believe just
identity.
from my
It's
experience.
really, it goes back to your identity. We're not fixing it. You just have to move to the identity of I am enough, really, versus a personality
Yeah,
thing. I mean,
yeah, it is something, but I'm sure the guys probably don't appreciate me talking about it too much, but it is unique to it, and but they're great guys. I mean, so anyways, the guys in the HINS program, they are some of the best guys you'll meet, and the program's a great program, and uh, you know,
have you
everybody.
seen a lot of success out of it, like in general, not just you, but like in looking at the program in general? Is there a lot of like high success
Well, I
rate?
have I have a, I have a few of my friends, that I still keep in touch with, that are doing well in it. I see the guys, at the meetings and stuff, and they all seem to be doing well. I mean, every once in a while, somebody will wash out, uh, but they come back in. I Yeah, so I mean, like, I mean, that's kind of part of it too. It's not necessarily, any one or two things, but everyone kind of slips every once in a while. But
Well, and I think it's important to remember too, it's not a death sentence. Like 20 years ago in nursing, you get a DUI, it's a death sentence. You're going to lose your license. Like it was right when I was first in school. You lose your license. You can't even set it to take a board date. So I mean, if you can't take your board exam because of the DUI and you have to explain all of that, you're not going to be able to, be credentialed or have your license, right? And then that was what years ago. But now that it's becoming more
yeah, I mean, these guys are the salt of the earth. But I can tell you just um, how much our government and our guys come together. Even the FAA to support us. Lyle Pruitt is kind of sorry. All right, let's do it again. and I'll tell you just how much camaraderie we have in you know in the FAA and with pilots. Lyle Prowse is one of the head guys for the Birds of a Feather meeting, which is our AA meeting, um, 12 step. But so Lyle was a Marine Corps pilot, and he was one of the few guys that got a bootstrap, straight without a degree, anything, straight as right off being E3 infantry. Hey, would you like to go to flight school? And he went on to be a highly decorated Vietnam fighter, and then he ended up going to work for Northwest Airlines. And I mean, the guy had the world by on a string, right? And he's one of the greatest guys you'll ever meet. But he made a mistake one night with his crew, and they stayed out drinking too late, and and they ended up getting to the plane, a little bit under the weather, and they didn't even wait to get cleared. They just like took off and just flew cross country, right? And
Yeah.
and by the time they got to the airport, on the other side, the FAA was waiting on them, and they all got ready. So he ended up with going to federal penitentiary, for the charge. A lot of the other guys got charges too. But I'm just telling you how much grace you can get in the program. This is how you can turn things around. So he turned his life around so much in the program while he was in, and was just, I mean, he was just appalled by everything. He just did a 180 in his life, and so much so that the judge that had sentenced him to federal prison said he had never seen a change in anyone like him, and actually ended up, pulling his time, right, and let him come out. Now the FAA stripped him of all of his licenses, and at this point in time, he had lost, he'd lost all of his money, fighting stuff in court, and he was kind of on his last leg. But he had someone that reached out to him that was willing to help him get all of his certificates again, right? So he went up and with this gentleman who's willing to let him use his plane in the flight school. He finished all of his check rides all the way to ATP, and then got his job back at the airline afterwards. But what was so unique about it is that Bill Clinton was so moved by this his his turnaround that he actually pardoned him, right, from that felony, uh, you know, for flying, all those people drunk. And
Wow.
so he got his job back, and then in the last year of his tenure there, the president of the airline had been talking to him, restored him back to captain, and he retired as a captain with the same airline that all that stuff happened with. So he's probably the biggest success story in the HIMSS program and what it can do for a man if he's willing to turn his life around, right? We all make mistakes, you know. Hopefully we catch them before it hurts other people. But what I'm saying is that if the program can do that for him, the program can do that for anyone. And he's
Yeah.
still sober today. I mean, he's retired. He could drink any day he wants to, right? But he enjoys the program so much, and he's actually got a book, guys. If you guys want to get his book, let me see what his book is. I'd like to. I'll post that here. His book is called Final Approach, and it was and I'll post it in the links. But he's a great guy, American Indian, loves his loves his heritage, and one of the greatest guys that you'll ever meet. He humbles me every time I hear him talk, And whenever I think sometimes maybe I can't do it, I'm like, oh my God, this guy did something that that's something really amazing. So, but yeah, I'll put his story in the link. But yeah, that's the kind of culture it is. It is not a shaming culture. It really is not. I know it, and even my AME has a little bit of something to say to me, I'm sure, I but I know that it comes from a place of love, and I know that the camaraderie that that's there is worth every every step of it. So, anyways, I kind of had a hard time getting through this one because it was a little bit personal. I didn't really expect it. I was kind of hoping that I would get somebody else here to do it for me, and
I think you did
that
great. I
wasn't me.
learned a lot. I had no
So,
knowledge of this. Yeah, you taught
yeah,
me a lot.
it's but for GA pilots, the HINS program is really specifically for commercial pilots. I mean, it's more kind of, directed toward them. When you're a general aviation pilot, it gets a little bit more convoluted. It's a little bit harder to know where you fit in, where you don't, where you go, where you don't. I was traveling a lot, this summer, as you know, and it made it kind of hard for me to be as into the program, I guess, as the Delta pilots, And so, anyways, I promise you, I will short up. God is my witness. All right, I am done with this conversation. And guys, remember, the hills are not flat. Keep climbing, and we'll be here with you to do it with you.